Coronation Street tease that the cobblestones of Weatherfield soon will bear witness to a shocking revelation. Gary Windus, after days of darkness and uncertainty, lies on the brink of awakening from his hospital-induced slumber. From the moment the ambulance sirens pierced the quiet of Oddie's birthday celebration, an undercurrent of dread swept through the gathered friends and family. No one anticipated that a seemingly innocuous evening, brimming with laughter, balloons, and the innocent delight of children, would end in chaos. It was Nina Lucas, ever vigilant and attuned to the subtler notes of tension, who first noticed Gary's unsteady gait as he approached the garden marquee. His face, usually composed and confident, was etched with a pain so deep it seemed almost tangible. Later, as the night drew on and shadows lengthened, she would recall that moment with a pang of regret. The way his hand trembled slightly as he reached for a second helping of cake. In a heartbeat, everything changed. The catalyst of Gary's near-fatal collapse was a mysterious powder that Brody Hudson, ever the enigma, had slipped into the party's punch bowl. Brody, who usually drifted through the underworld factory's corridors like a leaf on a stream, had taken an uncharacteristic interest in the celebrations, his pockets jangling with a small packet, whose contents he refused to name. That substance, once mixed, was enough to render the strongest man unconscious. Witnesses would later describe Gary's sudden slump to the ground as if gravity itself had betrayed him. The scene that followed was one of terror, Liam crying out for his father, Carla hurrying to shield her son's eyes, and Lisa snapping hurried texts to Kit Hudson, pleading for help. While medical staff worked feverishly to stabilize Gary at Weatherfield General, an unsettling hush fell over the cobbles. A single woman, her identity shrouded in secrecy, slipped away from the gathering just before paramedics arrived. Clutching her coat tightly around her, she whisked Gary into her car, her hands pale but steady. No one saw her, but her intervention ensured that Gary was rushed to intensive care before the hospital's official ambulance even pulled up. In the days that followed, gossip columns buzzed with speculation. Who was this mysterious Good Samaritan? And why the secrecy? Some whispered that her ties to Linda Hancock, a name murmured in Weatherfield's darker corridors, explained her willingness to conceal Gary's rescue. Others suspected a deeper motive, one cloaked in loyalty, fear, or perhaps blackmail. At the center of every theory, however, stood Lou, Gary's older brother. From the outset, Lou's behavior was inexplicably cagey. He arrived late to Liam's birthday party, his coat dusted with foreign earth, his eyes darting to corners as if expecting danger to leap from the shadows. Maria Connor, whose instincts for truth rivaled her gift for tailoring, watched Lou more closely than anyone else. They had crossed paths that evening, and she vividly remembered the furtive glance he cast her way, an unspoken plea, or perhaps a warning. It was the last moment, peaceful or otherwise, that Maria saw Gary and Lou together until whispers of Gary's disappearance began to take root. Maria's discovery ignited a spark of rumor that grew into a roaring blaze. When she told friends that Lou had left the party with Gary in tow, and that she had seen them exchange hurried words by the back gate, her words carried weight. But when Marie McIntyre, a friend of Liam's mother Carla, claimed that Gary was not present at the birthday celebrations at all, the gossip took on a life of its own. Marie's confidence stemmed from her own memory of the event. She had swept through the living room, counting heads for a game of Pass the Parcel, and Gary's usual spot by Lisa's side was conspicuously empty. Relying on that recollection, she spread the news that Gary had vanished without a trace. The implications were terrifying. Had someone deliberately removed him from the party? Or had he slipped away of his own accord? Carla and Lisa, desperate for answers, scoured Weatherfield's pubs, corner shops, and chatty residents, anyone who might recall the details of that evening. They learned of a taxi that had lingered at the front gates well after midnight, of a man in a dark hoodie lurking near the garden fence, and of footprints in the dewy grass that led toward the factory's side entrance. Yet, no one could confirm that Gary had passed through that route. Each nugget of information only deepened the mystery, leaving Carla and Lisa to wonder whether they were the victims of misplaced memories or intentional obfuscation. Meanwhile, Kit Hudson, cousin to Brody and brother to the suspicious Lou, took it upon himself to visit Weatherfield General in search of Gary. Kit's inquiries were met with polite, but firm denials. No G. Windus had arrived via ambulance, and no records indicated his presence in any ward. A nurse even suggested that perhaps Kit had arrived too early, that sometimes records took hours to update. But Kit, with his characteristic stubbornness, probed further, rifling through visitor logs and questioning orderlies. His determination only served to heighten his family's unease. If Gary truly had been brought in, why would hospital staff deny his admission? And if he was not there, where had he gone? As whispers grew louder and accusations more pointed, a chilling doubt settled over Weatherfield. Was Gary Windus the victim of a cruel accident? Or was he at the mercy of a deliberate attack? Nina, whose compassion for Gary transcended mere friendship, refused to accept ambiguity. "I saw him," she declared to Maria and Carla during a tense meeting at the bistro. "He was on the ground, bleeding, barely breathing. I thought for sure I had lost him." Her voice trembled with the memory of that moment, the way his eyes fluttered open, recognition mingled with agony, before darkness claimed him once more. That image, burned into Nina's mind, became the cornerstone of every theory. If Gary had truly reached the hospital, he'd bear the scars of his injury. If not, then the darkness that engulfed him must have been deeper than any physical wound. Coronation Street viewers will soon discover that, as days passed, the web of secrecy tightened. The unnamed woman who orchestrated Gary's clandestine hospital admission watched from afar, her hands trembling as the doctors monitored his vitals. In whispered conversations with an unknown accomplice, she hinted at a debt owed. One tied to Gary's past transgressions, when he'd walked the line between enforcer and ally for some of Weatherfield's more unsavory characters. Could her intervention be repayment, or was it a calculated move to control Gary's fate? And why involve Lou, whose loyalties had never been entirely clear? Back on the cobbles, Lou's isolation grew. His shop, once a bustling haven for locals in search of homeware treasures, remained shuttered. Passers-by claimed to see him pacing behind the grime-streaked windows, phone pressed to his ear in hushed urgency. When finally he emerged, his face was drawn, eyes ringed with exhaustion. He made his way to the Rover's Return, where he sat alone in a corner booth, nursing a pint as if it could wash away his guilt, or his grief. Rumors swirled that Lou had been seen arguing with Brody shortly before the party, though neither man would confirm the story. Some suspect that secrets shared between them that night set the tragic events in motion. Yet hope remains. Coronation Street teased that in the next episode, after days of critical care and unanswered questions, Gary's fingers will twitch. A single tear may roll down his cheek as memories of the party and the poisonous powder flicker behind closed eyelids. For those who love him, Carla, Liam, Nina, Maria, those first signs of consciousness will be a beacon in the suffocating gloom. But even as he awakens, fresh mysteries will cascade into view, his first words, whether he can recall the woman who saved him, and what he remembers of Brody's powder. More than that, viewers will learn whether Gary's return to the world of the living will bring reconciliation or reckoning. As dusk falls on Weatherfield, the street lamps casting long shadows over the terraced houses, one certainty prevails: nothing here is as it seems. The cobbles hold more secrets than they ever have before, and every resident, from the warm-hearted barmaid to the cunning factory hand, carries a piece of the puzzle. For Gary Windus, the road to recovery will be fraught with revelations that could shatter families and friendships alike. And for those left waiting in the wings, the question remains: who truly has Gary's best interests at heart, and who will stop at nothing to see him remain silent? Coronation Street's cobbles lay quiet under a slate-grey sky, as the next chapter of Gary's saga began to unfold. Dawn broke over Weatherfield General, casting pale light into the intensive care unit where monitors beeped steadily in the hush. Nurse Haley, though no stranger to critical cases, found herself unsettled by the mystery shrouding her newest patient, Gary Windus. His condition was stable, his heart strong, his breathing steady, but every test returned the same baffling absence of explanation. Toxicology screens showed only trace elements of the powder Brody had admitted slipping into the punch, yet the severity of Gary's collapse far exceeded anything those traces should have produced. Lou Windus entered the ICU corridor with measured steps, arms wrapped around himself as though to ward off the chill. He paused outside the door marked Bed 4, peering in through the small window. There was Gary, pale and frail beneath crisp, white sheets, tubes snaking from his arm to the fore stand, and a ventilator gently rising and falling with each breath. Lou's gaze hardened as he watched, guilt and determination warring behind his eyes. The debt he owed his brother was immense, yet he couldn't shake the fear that by saving Gary, he had only pulled him deeper into a web of danger. When the door opened, Lou stepped inside, careful not to jostle any equipment. He sat by the bedside and took Gary's lifeless hand in his own, turning it over to weigh its chill. "You've given me so much, lad," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I won't lose you now." Yet as he spoke, the question fractured his thoughts. What had really happened at that party? He knew Brody's role, but why had the mysterious woman intervened so decisively, and what did she expect in return? In a modest flat on Coronation Street, Maria Connor paced restlessly. She'd spent the early hours poring over photos from Oddie's party, snapshots taken by well-meaning guests that now felt unbearably damning. In one frame, Gary clutched a drink in his hand, in another, Lou leaned in close, whispering something into Gary's ear. Maria studied each image, hunting for clues. Their expressions were unreadable, camaraderie mixed with something darker, something secret. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nina, meeting at the bistro, 10 a.m. urgent. Maria's stomach knotted. She knew better than to ignore Nina's summons. Despite her suspension from the factory, after a heated confrontation with Carla, Maria's instincts were sharper than ever. If there was one person who could cut through the lies, it was her. Nina Lucas arrived at the bistro first, eyes red-rimmed but resolute. She slid into a booth as Maria slipped into the seat opposite. Between them sat cups of untouched coffee and a stack of printed documents, hospital visit logs, taxi receipts, and a map of Weatherfield with circles and arrows scribbled in red pen. "Nina," Maria began, voice low, "what do we have?" Nina tapped the top sheet. "The hospital confirms Gary wasn't admitted through official channels. But look here," she pointed to a line in the log. "A visitor registered, Lou W., at 2:37 a.m., citing a private admission." Maria's breath caught. So the unnamed woman used Lou's name to check Gary, Indiana. Nina nodded. She said it was an emergency, that Gary couldn't wait. They didn't question it. Maria leaned back, mind racing. "But that's not all. I checked the taxi firm records. A black bonnet was booked from the Underworld factory to the hospital at exactly 2:10 a.m. It matches the time that woman whisked Gary away. And the phone number on the booking, it's traced to an unregistered burner." Nina shivered. Whoever she is, she planned this meticulously. But why? What does she want with Gary? Maria stared out the window at the empty street. "Whatever it is, we need to find her." Meanwhile, in the backroom of Scarborough's shop, her once thriving business now in limbo, Carla Connor felt trapped in a nightmare. Her son Liam's laughter had long since faded from her memory, replaced by a dull ache. She had turned her flat inside out in search of the invitation list, message chains, anything that might name the mystery woman. But all she found were gaps, people who claimed not to remember, receipts that seemed to vanish, and an unsettling silence from those who ought to speak. Late that morning, her phone rang. It was Lisa, her closest ally in this turmoil. "Carla, I just got a call from Oddie's mum," Lisa said, voice trembling. She mentioned Brody left the house in tears right after the punch was served. "I think he knows more than he's told us." Carla's heart pounded. "Then I'll talk to him." In the dim back garden of the Hudson home, Brody stood alone under the dripping wisteria, the early rain mingling with his tears. He cradled the empty packet that had caused so much destruction. His cousin Kit's words still echoed in his mind. "Brody, if you're covering up for someone else, you'll bury yourself too." Brody raised his head as footsteps approached. Carla emerged from the porch, determination overriding fear. "Brody," she said quietly, "we need to talk." He spun around, eyes wild. "I didn't mean any harm, Carla. It was supposed to be a harmless prank, just a bit of harmless fun at Oddie's expense. I never thought Gary would collapse like that." Carla closed the distance between them. "Brody, what powder did you use?" He swallowed hard. "It's something I got from an old contact, calls it dream dust. Supposed to make you euphoric for a few minutes. But when you combine it with alcohol, it's unpredictable." "I'm sorry, Carla. I'm so sorry." Carla studied him, weighing every word. "Who was the contact?" Brody hesitated. "I can't say. He'll kill me if I name him." Carla's jaw clenched. "If we don't find out who he is, this won't end. They'll bury Gary to hide the truth, and Brody, you and I, will be next." Brody's shoulders sagged. "I know." That afternoon, Kit Hudson arrived at Lou's flat, determination flashing in his eyes. He'd learned from Maria that the hospital admission was clandestine, and he suspected Lou had a hand in it. But Kit's loyalty to family was fierce. He needed answers, not accusations. Lou opened the door slowly, face drawn and eyes haunted. He nodded Kit in. Inside, they sat amid the chaos of overturned boxes and scattered belongings. "Tell me straight, Kit," Lou said. "What do you know?" Kit placed a manila envelope on the table. "These are CCTV extracts from the factory gate and the taxi rank." He spread out the prints, images of the burner phone number, Brody's racing car pulling up, and, most chillingly, the silhouetted figure of a woman leading Gary toward the taxi. Lou's face drained of color. "That's her," he whispered. "The one who saved him." Kit tapped a print. "She's wearing a necklace, it caught my eye in the footage. A silver locket with an engraving. I asked around. Linda Hancock was known to wear something similar." Lou's breath hitched. "If it's Linda." Kit nodded. "Then she's using old favors, old debts, to control Gary. And if he wakes up, she may expect something in return." Lou pulled his jacket tighter. "I'll find her." That evening, under a bruised sky, Maria and Nina followed a fresh lead to the derelict warehouse on the edge of town. Reports suggested Linda Hancock's gang had used the building for clandestine meetings. The warehouse door gaped open, its interior swallowed by gloom. Inside, echoes of dripping water and distant scuttling filled the air. Maria's heart pounded as she whispered, "Be ready." Nina nodded, clutching her phone as a makeshift torch. They crept forward, stepping over broken crates, until they found themselves in a large, hollow chamber. A single naked bulb hung from the ceiling, illuminating a metal table in the center. And on that table lay the silver locket, its engraving, I.O., for I.O., gleaming in the weak light. "We're close," Maria said, voice trembling. A door creaked behind them. Nina spun, heart in throat, as the mysterious woman emerged, a lithe figure in dark clothing, face obscured by the shadow of her hood. She smiled, slow and cold. "I wondered when you'd show up." Back at the hospital, Gary's chest rose and fell unsteadily as he drifted between dreams. In one vision, he stood at the factory gates, powder shimmering in his palm. In another, Lou's face loomed above him, eyes full of sorrow. He tried to speak, but no sound came. The ventilator hissed, and his world went black again. On Coronation Street, the residents waited with bated breath. As the first stars appeared in the evening sky, every phone, every screen, every whispered conversation focused on one question: would Gary awaken, and would he remember the truth? What comes next will change the lives of those on Weatherfield forever. Alliances will be tested, loyalties torn apart, and debts, long buried, demand recompense. For Gary Windus, waking from the darkness is only the beginning. The real fight lies in what he must face when he finally opens his eyes.